Alright lads, this tutorial was requested by a patron of mine, Moonlight. Shout out to that guy, big supporter. Essentially what I'm going to be doing is doing a video representation of the wiki guide that I wrote up with a bit of texture editing to show you it in practice. First things first is to make sure you have Compressinator downloaded and installed, and the DDS plugins installed to your 2D editing software. So for me, it's Photoshop. So first files that you might come across are a color and an NRM. So for color, this is your albedo or your diffuse, however you want to define it. This is the color representation of your mesh. It doesn't need explaining, it's very basic. I'm sure you understand. I'm not going to insult you. NRM is the normal map, roughness, and metallic, all pushed into one. If you're coming over from 2K19, essentially what they've done is if they've taken the MR map and pushed it into the normal. This is ugly, but it's what we have to deal with now. We have the roughness. This is the how reflective the mesh is. So from 0 being fully reflective and 1 being matte, like no reflection at all. 0 being black, 1 being white. It's not really used broadly. The extremes of where you will see this is in like belts or arenas. Characters, it's very baseline. Then you have the metal or metallic. Again, this is very basic to understand. It's how metallic your surface is. So doesn't really need explaining. You don't really see this on characters, at least in this tutorial. We won't be touching it. It's mostly seen on belts to give off that metallic feel, or on arena props. Then we have the normal, very basic. How can I describe this? It's like a visual trick of depth. If you're familiar with modding, you already know what this is, but it can give you the feel of something being 3D when it actually isn't. And the NRM, like I said, is just, they're all pushed together. So what I just explained, the roughness, the metal, and normal, they're all combined in different channels. So for this tutorial, I'm going to edit Smojo. And I'm going to edit his bottoms to change them to, I don't know, whatever I feel like. So I need to know his ID, what baked file he's in, so I can access the textures and models. So you'll find the Smojo is in baked file 03. I'm going to open that in Cake Tools. Already got it ready. Once you pull down this list, you're going to see a whole bunch of shit. Base model is the actual wrestler himself. They'll have no gear on him at all. If I double click this, you will see what I'm talking about. So as you can see, this is literally, as it says, bare bones base model. In the textures, you will see his head, body. They all look a bit weird, but once you get familiar with it, you'll understand the flow. For this tutorial, we're not touching these, it's not necessary. What we need is the default attire. This is the one that comes with the base game. There's no alt attires associated with it. Look at the textures, and you'll see in here, this is the one that we're going to edit. So this part, I will go into my quote-unquote mods folder, which is here. Create a folder, and this will be used for my development. Everything here will be for my development. Go back to your Cake Tools. What I'm going to do is I'm going to extract all the textures into the folder. Ideally, I would just click Smojo and just pull the whole root, but Cake Tools doesn't support this right now. Come on, Hanley, sorry out, brother. So yeah, double click this little button at the top, select your development folder, and extract them all. And you will see them all in here. one thing to note is just because it's extracted from Cake Tools doesn't mean the compression on the files is perfectly fine. An example of this being the eye color. If you just pull the default out and bake it, thinking that the compression's all fine and everything, it's not. When Cake Tools pulls the DDS files out, it gives them to you in a readable way so that you can see them in Photoshop. You will need to resave them with the correct compression settings, or else for the eyes in game it'll appear white. Alright, so now I want to edit bottom's color. Now I open this in Photoshop. Now it's easy to edit here and load it in the game, but if you're doing a more complex texture, you want to see it before you put it in game, because that would be trivial. So what I'm going to do is go back to Cake Tools. I'm going to click default attire, and I will see 579_attire.mdl. This is the mesh, the visual representation, which we're after. So I'm going to export this into my development folder, which is a mess. Once that's done, I'm going to load up Blender. Make sure you have the latest scripts from Hanley's, because there's quite a lot going on now. I'm using an experimental build, but it's the same. It'll still work the same. Then go to your mods folder and import Smojo. And there we go. We've got Smojo in Blender. So for this tutorial, I don't want any of this other junk, so I'm going to turn it off. What do I need to turn it off? Get these turned off. Don't want them. It's just so we can see the pans itself. If you see Lambert, these are collisions. You don't need to worry about them. I'll explain them in a different tutorial when we're doing physics. So what we're after is these. Now, for some reason, with 2K, they decided to remove the physics from Smojo's shots, which is dumb. So you won't see an extra Lambert here on the pants for Smojo. But on some of your characters, you might see an extra layer on whichever body part you're editing. Delete the one with the lowest polys, because will be used as the collision. So just hide it. Don't delete it, because you will need it if you're doing any type of model editing. Alright, so we got to Photoshop. We've got this texture. We're going to do File, Save As. Now, save as TIFF. PSD is gone. It's a deprecated format. It's just horrible. The current generations use TIFF. It's a more lightweight format. A lot of industries use this now, and it's essentially needed for Compressinator, because Compressinator doesn't support PSD, at least from the GUI. So I'm going to save this, keep the default settings, it's fine. Flip back to Blender. Now we're going to add a material on here. New base color, click here, image texture, open, locate to the texture that we just saved. Nothing will appear. What you need to do is you need to go up to the top here, this little arrow, and enable texture, and you will see your texture in game. Now I recommend that you get an add-on called Auto Reload. It will reload your textures every time you make an edit in Photoshop. I'll put it in the Patreon and the description. It's a very useful tool. So now you can begin editing to whatever you like. I'm going to speed this up. Once you've got your texture and you're satisfied with it, I definitely am. We need to bring this into the game. This is the process that can seem a bit daunting, but once you get into the rhythm, very easy. Especially now with the streamlined process with 2K22. Alright, so you want to pull up Compressinator. In fact, first go to your mods folder and you want to create the structure here. So from Smojo straight through to textures. What I do, it's a very lazy process. I copy this entire structure here, the path line, go into my mods folder, shift click, open command window, type mkdir, paste the directory. You might need to change the backslashes. I know I do. Once that's done, you will see the structure that we need. Alright, so click up here, copy this path, go into compressor, and we need to locate our edited texture, which is the bottoms. You can just drag this on. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky. Sometimes I've noticed when you save a project, then you close compressor and open it back up, all that you have in your project will be wiped. I don't know what this is, so just be really careful when you're editing your projects, because I've seen it bug out. Anyway, so we want to get this properly saved in the correct compression, correct format. If you uncheck this little drop down, you'll see add destination settings, double click. In the folder path, paste the folder you just copied from your mods folder. And we need, for this, because it's a color, we need to refer back to the wiki, and it uses DXT1 and 1% quality. Now, you don't need to use DXT1, you can use BC1. I get better results. Put quality to 1. Cut off the extension because it has to match the name in here. Hit save. Now, if I went and processed this file in game, it'd work, but from a distance, you're going to see a lot of artifacts, or it'll look kind of like it hasn't got anti-aliasing. This is because it hasn't got bitmaps. You need bitmaps to make your textures and everything look good, or else from a distance, it's just going to look like shit. So select the texture, and there's a little box here that looks awful, and it'll say generate bitmaps. Just click that, click generate, and it will have essentially generated the bitmaps for your texture. Some textures take longer, especially normal maps, but it'll get the job done. So now select your texture, click this little button here, and it'll process the image. Done. Go back to your folder, you'll see it here. Now this is converted and compressed to the exact settings that are required for 2K22. Be mindful that sometimes the DDS files might have a alternate compression setting. For example, the crowd signs, they need to be BC3, I believe. The wiki needs updating. If you come across a file and it's acting a bit strange, the file that you extract from Cake Tools, open it in Hexed, like a hex editor, and you'll see the compression setting. It's like a few lines down. You will have that setting in Compressinator, so just use that. But for this tutorial, it doesn't matter, especially for characters, it's not really applied. So now that that's done, we can go to Cake Tools and pick our folder. Alright, once that's done, we can boot the game up. locate your character. Size of Samoa Joe. Double entrance is on. Let's kick this guy's ass. And there's your texture. All working, no issues, no weird artifacts. Just a nice, lovely Willy on Samoa Joe's shots. I will do a more advanced tutorial, which will include the roughness, the normal maps, the metallic. I think the metallic one I'm going to put in the advanced belt tutorial, which is where I'm going to show you my methods for creating belts. So yeah, enjoy texture editing. Cheers, lads.